Ordinarily, it would seem like the space between the piston and the head would be equal to the thickness of the head gasket, but that's not the way it works on at least this diesel engine. To get the highest compression pressures, the piston rises above the block into the squish area occupied by the head gasket. Let me show you. Place a straight edge on a piston and use a feeler gauge to measure how much it rises out of the block. Here we can see it's 32 thousandths. Next, we must measure thickness of the original head gasket at the fire ring. This gasket measures 51 thousandths at the back of number 1 cylinder and 52 to 53 thousandths elsewhere. Subtracting the 32 thousandths piston protrusion from the old gasket thickness, we arrive at a difference of 19 to 21 thousandths, slightly less than the specification of 24 thousandths. Because this space is so tight and the gasket isn't under compression, I want to get a second opinion by following the procedure in the manual. First thing I want to do is take some of the excess oil off the top of the pistons. And then we're going to cut some soft wire out of 60 thousandths electrical solder. I couldn't find any real description for 60 thousandths soft wire, but what I found was that this electrical solder is 60 thousandths. So all I'm going to do is chop off 9 pieces of it to put around those pistons. A little less than a ½ inch long. Just really enough that you can pick up. So of course the idea here is to use these as little pieces of, what they used to call it, plastigauge. Yeah. And what we're going to do is put the head, or put the old head gasket on, and then torque the head down in the proper sequence to spec, depress these pieces of wire, and measure their thickness. And that will give us the piston to head clearance. Well, you've seen this head gasket before. It's pretty gnarly. So 2 things. I'm going to take a wire brush and brush it off, wipe it off, and I'm going to leave the oil film that we have on the block just to protect it, and it'll be easier to clean any of these pieces off later. Well, the wire brush knocked a lot of the loose stuff off. I don't know if the light will show this, but around these water passages close to the cylinder, there's some of that corrosion and material that's built up. And because the head is so clean, I'm going to go ahead and take the knife and scrape down as much of this as I can to get it down to level. I don't want to take anything less into the gasket material, but at least this carbon that has accumulated may tend to hold that head off of the block enough to distort the measurement. Yeah, I think that's going to be good. Here we go. Line it up over those pins. I'm going to rotate the crank a little bit to get all pistons down away from the head surface. And we'll slowly set our head down where it should go. There we go. So as I was getting ready to put the head bolts in, I thought I'd better brush them down and see how they looked. And I found some interesting things. Anyway, I'm going to brush them as good as I can. Get the carbon out of the threads. Clean up the shanks, the bolts. In doing so, I found some abnormalities. And one of them, as you can see, has a a lot of corrosion down in the threads. I'd really rather have a new head bolt than putting that one back in. But for the piston to, excuse me, check the piston to head clearance, I could put a washer over it. And there's just been some water in these holes. Anyway, you get the idea. I want you to see what the threads look like on these head bolts. The first three there are rusty. They came from the intake side. The rest of them were random. But what we want to notice is, especially this one here, I can't hold the camera very well, but this one, I brushed it. The threads are pretty well gone right there about where the head gasket looks like it might have gone. These others have carbon buildup close to where the head gasket was, indicating that it very well could have been leaking. Well, my dad gave me two important pieces of advice. First one, there's no time like the present. And the second one is always get a job with a seat on it. Well, right now, I have to stand up. But we're going to do the typical thing. You have to oil the bolts before putting them in. So just put a little oil around the surface that's going to engage the cap bolt, and we just keep going. We're going to tighten these down in three tightens. First one will be 14 foot-pounds, followed by 28, and then the final at 45. Then we will take the crank, turn it over. See if we can smash those little wires. And then take the head off in the sequence in reverse. There it is. Well, this would be a good time for having a speed wrench, right? This is the best I have. This is the one I'll use. Okay, here's the last one. I've got the torque wrench set to 14 pounds. And we're going to start this sequence. Have that one down here. Okay, here we go. All right. Now we'll turn up to, there's 20, 3, 4. You get the idea. Number 1. 2. 14. Now we're going to go up to 45 pounds. And 14. I don't know what to expect, but I'm going to use my long wrench. And I'm only going to count enough revolutions to make it around one time. So, we'll go 90. 180, 270, 360. Okay, I'm going to remove the head bolts in reverse order. I'm going to start with number 14. I'm going to turn it about a quarter of a turn. Then we're going to go to number 13, number 12. All right, now we'll do our speed wrench and pull these out, see what we found. And we'll see if we can get Mr. Head off the block. Looks like most of them stuck to the head, right where the valves are. This is the one from number 1. .22. So I've got 1 in cylinder 2. .21, 22, 23 thousandths. And this one from number 3. .23.5 is thinnest. Okay. Well, as you can see, the results are up to 2 thousandths less than what's specified. But there's another variable. The new head gasket measures 65 thousandths. How much will it compress? A call to Yanmar is in order, but before making it, let's turn our attention to the valves and how much was removed to make them seal. In the initial inspection, the machinist found the exhaust valve leaking in cylinder 1, and this can help explain the low compression numbers there. The work was completed before I could get back to record video, but that work too is pretty straightforward. But there is more to the story. In an order mix-up, only 3 stem seals arrived, and Jeff installed the best of the remaining seals, but suggested I replace those 3 before installing the head. This gave me the opportunity to check for myself the spring length and their straightness. I also learned why the 220 manual tells us to install springs with the tight and painted section to the head. This simply allows the spring compressor to engage more of the spring for easier removal. When I was trying to get the valve springs off the head, I didn't have a suitable puller. But in one of my shop drawers, I remembered I had this guy. But at the time, this area here was spread too wide, and these hooks were too wide to grab those little springs. So, thought about it a little bit. Came over to the press and show you what I did. I found the right size socket, forced it in between here, and then set it up in a simple situation here in the press where the first press was going to compress these, and then the second moment was going to bend this bottom tooth back, or the spring catcher, to where it needed to be. And I'm not going to go do the whole thing now, but by doing that, these 2 pieces were brought back together, and a slight bend was put into that hook that had been straightened out before. And sure enough, it all worked. So you may not have the right tool, but you might have one in your toolbox that you can make fit. Do your shopping at home. Well, the new seals are here. So to take the old valve stem seals off, I was just using a screwdriver. Just pry them back a little ways. And come off in 2 pieces. Here's how the mix-up occurred, that in a bag there are only 3. So I have 3 here. So to put the new ones on, just slip it over the valve stem. And I'm using a 13 millimeter and a 2-pound hammer. Just set it in place. As I said earlier, you can watch me fumble in real time. I'm going to attempt to just run you through how to put these springs back on. Again, the painted side, or the painted area with the most springs, needs to go down. So put the cap in. You can fiddle around with it. I've got to loosen this up a little bit. You want to pick the closest areas you can get toward the bottom. Make sure the cap is centered enough so that you can get the keepers in. It's a little bit off. You may have a better, like one of those air units. I want to make sure it's centered. But out here on the farm, we don't have things like that. So we're going to scrunch it down a good amount. No more than necessary. I put some paper towel underneath the valve to hold it into place. Now let me move in a little tighter here. See if we're in focus. All right. Now the keeper, just float one in there on the back. I also used tweezers before to get them out. But I think since I have a good compress on the spring, we'll be able to get that. Went right in there. Now we take the, pull it up, yeah, we're good. So we take the compressor off slowly. Got it kind of stuck in that bottom spring. There we go. And then take our favorite 2-pound hammer and just bounce it a little bit to make sure that the keepers are in place. And that's how you do it. Luckily for me and the budget, all springs were consistently within 10 thousandths of specified height, and that's good enough for me. Now for the not so good news. Intake valves exceed specification by 16, 10, and 13 thousandths, and exhaust valves are 11 thousandths less, meaning the intakes are slightly lowering compression and the exhausts are a bit closer to contacting the pistons. Time to contact Yanmar. Within an hour of my online question, the Senior Regional Field Service Manager called. He said that 5 thousandths less piston to head clearance is fine and will slightly raise the compression pressure. This will offset the lowering of it by the increased recession of the intake valves. The 11 thousandths tighter exhaust clearance is a different matter, however. His recommendation was to put Prussian blue on the valves, reassemble the top end, and carefully bar the engine over. The couple of hours spent doing it may show contact or prove things are okay. At least it will provide peace of mind and provide you more information about working on these gems. Also, having that guy's 855 coming in with the rod through the block is a reminder that you can't be too careful. So what's next? Episode 8, Thinking Ahead, will have a part 3, so stay tuned.